Okay. Can you hear me? One sec, let me check. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so let's begin. And this is Manoj Onkar, and I am representing the Global Transformation Consulting. I thank Calrex Foundation for this opportunity to talk to all of you here on K Talk. As you know, this topic is beyond transformation from ego to eco. I am going to put my video on. I hope you can see it. Okay, let me stop the screen share. Sorry for the technology glitches. As you know, that children and technology always fail you at the wrong time. Okay, so while the screen thing is getting sorted out, let's continue. So I represent this organization called Global Transformation Consulting, and what we intend to do as a team of global experts working on people and organizational transformation, our intention is to alter the consciousness with which businesses, society, and individuals operate. So that's our game, to alter the consciousness with which businesses, society, and individuals operate. And inside of that, this opportunity of sharing with all of you is highly appreciated. So let's look at this topic, what we call as ego to eco. So this ego thinking is something that we are all programmed into from our childhood. We are programmed into this ego thinking. And what we want to look at today is how it is affecting everything in our life, how it affects our personal life, our family life, our social life, also how it shows up in our businesses, in our organizations, in the way we think of our industry, the way we think of our profession, how organizations work, how government work, industries, you name it. It is affecting every part of our life. So what do I mean by that? So let's first understand what is ego thinking. Ego is like a boundary. So when I say me, that's a boundary. When I say my family, that's a boundary. When I say my department, that's a boundary. So you can say boundary, it's also a silo, it's also a limit that you put that, oh, I am going to take care of these people and I am not really worried about everybody else. Okay. So that is the ego thinking that runs everywhere in our life. How does it show up? You look at the world, right? So it shows up in many ways in the world. What we're going to talk about today is first, predominantly, you can see it in the form of three divides. It's called the eco divide or the ecological divide, the social divide, and the spiritual divide. As soon as my computer gets reconnected, I'm going to show you the screens also on that, the slides on that, but I'm sure you can understand the conversation. So the first one is eco divide. And what we mean by eco divide is human beings, we as human beings are disconnected from nature. How does it show up? Oh, many ways, right? So it shows up in the quality of food we get to eat, the quality of air we get to breathe. It shows up in the way we use natural resources, everything. Again, if there was a number to capture that ecological divide, that would be 1.5. What it means is
We
we
are
are
consuming.
consuming.
Sorry,
Sorry, there was an echo. Should be fine now. Mhm. Give me 1 second. Sorry for this. Here we go. My apologies. Okay, so the ecological divide is captured by the number 1.5, which means we are consuming 1.5 times the regenerative capacity of planet Earth. Right? So that's one way you can see. What is the second way you can see is, or sorry, what is the second divide? The second divide is what we call as the social divide. Social divide is human beings are not connected to other human beings. Okay. Now it shows up in many ways. All of us can see we are divided among ourselves in many ways. You can name it: age, gender, money, caste, creed, profession, country, you name it. We have found hundreds of ways to divide ourselves. So it shows up in many ways, right? One of the big ways it shows up as far as the global economy is concerned is wealth distribution. 1% of the population has more wealth than 50% of the population. And that's a big inequality that we have on the planet. Now, of course, you and I are not responsible individually for it, but that's a reality that we are dealing with. And we cannot ignore that. Okay. So that's the social divide. And then let's look at the third one, which is the spiritual divide. What is the spiritual divide? Spiritual divide is we are not connected with our own self, our real self. How does that show up? Look at the stress that we carry, the anxiety that we live with, right? And all the things that we have to do to just kind of keep ourselves sane and in balance. One of the sad statistics to represent this spiritual divide is 10 lakhs. On average, 10 lakh people commit suicide in the world. Another way to say that is more people kill themselves than are killed by others. In spite of all the wars and terrorism and everything going on, more people are killing themselves than are killed by others. Now, some of us may say, "Oh, it's not connected with me directly," but as you go deeper, you will start seeing that everybody is connected. It's connected with all of us. Okay, so let me take you through a little bit more of this. Okay, I hope you can now see the slide. So these three divides, they show up in form of this bubbles. We live in bubbles, and always when bubbles burst, the people who are marginalized, they get impacted. So there is an ecological bubble that we live in, which is what I talked about earlier. We are consuming 1.5 times the regenerative capacity of planet Earth. Right? Then there is an income bubble, which I also mentioned, wherein 1% owns almost 50%, what 50% of the planet people own, right? That's a big divide. Then we had a financial bubble. What is the financial bubble? If you look at the real economy is where we have the products and the services, and there is a transaction of those products and services. That you can say is a good enough example of, or a good enough understanding of real economy. And then there is the financial economy, which is all speculation money. And the financial economy is many, many, many times the real economy. And that's the bubble. And then every time the financial economy bursts, the bubble bursts, who gets affected? Naturally, the marginalized people. Then it shows up in the technology bubble, which means there's a whole tendency to find everything as a technical solution, as a technology based solution. And inside of that, we end up dealing with symptoms instead of getting to the source and getting to the bottom of the issue and dealing with it in a systemic way. We end up dealing with the symptoms and the patchwork, and all the technology and all the R&D in the world is not oriented around what is needed in the world. It is more oriented around where the investor money is. Okay, so that's the technology bubble. Another one is leadership bubble. And you will see this bubble everywhere in your organizations, in the government, everywhere. The decision makers are disconnected from the people who are affected by those decisions. One bad example is the recent migrant crisis, but I don't think that is the only one. We can see hundreds of them. Then there is this consumerism bubble, the GDP bubble, wherein everybody is running after increasing GDP, $1 trillion GDP, this, that, everybody is running after that. But there is no data, no research which proves that GDP includes means happiness. If you actually go deeper, GDP calculations include those transactions also, which actually cause misery on the planet. And what I mean by that is all the war machinery and all the weapons, ammunitions, everything. They're part of the GDP. Is that causing happiness? No. And as such, this whole buy culture, that's not causing any happiness. It's actually adding to the ecological problems also. It's also adding to the financial problems in terms of the income bubble, all of that. Then if you look at the governance, there's the governance bubble, which again means that some people, special interest groups, influence the policies, influence the decisions, and the other people have no say. The last one is what we want to talk about is the ownership bubble. And if you look at what it means is whether you look at land or the natural resources or anything else, when it is owned by some people, it is not being used for the greater good of humanity, right? So it's not the best societal use. And all of this, generally, we don't think of, nobody wants to talk about it. But this is real. And this is all symptoms of what we have been trained in, ingrained in, is the whole ego thinking. And just to kind of go one more on that is we have to confront that there is a limit to growth. This whole growth paradigm, that doesn't work. It's not going to lead anywhere. We have to confront that this inequality is a problem. We have to confront that the speculative economy is different from the real economy, and that doesn't work for the planet. We have to confront the orientation of just using technology in a particular way where there is investor money and not really solving the planet challenges on the planet for people. That's not great thinking. Okay, so what do we do here? First thing is we can start noticing, start getting aware. How are we doing the same thinking? And secondly, of course, how do we get more and more people to become aware of this? So how does this ego thinking show up in our family? How does the ego thinking show up in our offices? Oh, are we looking at, oh, we want the business to grow X amount. Okay, great. Okay. How can you make sure that your business grows inside of it being a positive contribution on the planet? Instead of, oh, I want my business to grow. Maybe some people are generous. They say, oh, I want my employees to grow. Some people are, of course, oriented around, I want my stakeholders to grow, the stockholders to grow. Okay. Can you think beyond? How about my business actually making a positive difference in the society? And yeah, you're financially responsible, but there is a whole world beyond that. So that's the line of thinking that we want to encourage everybody to look at, right? And the real way is only by spreading awareness. So the real way to change a system is where we can start seeing how not only we, but we can encourage everybody around us to start seeing, okay, how is this ego thinking affecting us? And I know many of us may think, oh, we can't do anything about it. Okay, don't worry. We'll come to that. But first is getting the awareness, spreading the awareness. How is this whole ego thinking showing up in our business, in our company, in our industry, in our country? And what can we kind of at least bring awareness about? Okay. And then, of course, we could look at, okay, what is the alternative? So the alternative is to train ourselves in what we call as eco thinking. The word eco, I think it comes from a Greek or Latin word. It means home. And if you look at ecology or economics, it actually came from that word. So here, what do we mean is the whole planet is my home. Like we say in our Indian culture, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the whole planet is my family, right? Everybody, the whole world is my family. Now, when we start looking from that perspective and look at, okay, I'm in this business or I'm in this profession, how can I expand beyond my boundary, beyond me or my department or my company? But how do I start looking from a little bigger picture? And you might be surprised that the whole game alters. You might be surprised to notice that then there are many more players to play with. And there's much more fulfillment here. So I'll give you some examples. We have been doing this work for the last 5 years, consulting companies and individuals, professionals. So recently in one of our workshops, we had a doctor participating, and he provides specialized services for people who are dealing with paralysis, and is based in Maharashtra. And so we were coaching him, and so I asked him, how many patients do you see in a month? Okay, and he said that around 90 to 100. I said, okay, great. How in the geography that you cover, like your area from where people come and your patients come to you, how many people are dealing with this particular problem that you deal with? He said around 100,000 people. I said, okay. So one way you can look at your business is, okay, what is the service I can provide to these 90 people or 100 people who come to my company or to come to my hospital? And another way to look at it is, how do I provide service to these 100,000 people? Maybe the whole business model can change. Maybe the whole way of thinking, service as a business idea can be brought in. Like that, everywhere when we start seeing, right, you can expand the horizon from which you operate. For us, when we look at, okay, we have this technology, which is, by the way, this technology is the work that we're doing here is built on Theory U by MIT professor Dr. Otto Scharmer. And their commitment is also transformation of businesses, society, and self. And they've been offering these courses through edX for the last 4 or 5 years, free. Okay. MIT, and these courses, of course, are also available in MIT in a paid format. And then they do consulting, and they are charged at the fees that they charge. But on edX, you can participate and get the basic principles free with no restrictions. And it also is available as a commons license, which means you can learn the principles and you can actually go out and use it. You have to give them the credit, but that's it, no control. Now, what is that? This is all creating the common good and thinking from the common good. Has it helped them? Sure. A course which was running in MIT for maybe whatever 100, 200, 500 people attending every year. Now, because it is available on this platform, there are around 2 lakh plus people who have participated. 300 plus companies like us who take this technology, convert it into our own programs and offerings, and take it to organizations all over the world. There are a lot of people who are working on the social conversation, education, and healthcare. So when you think from serving and making it from the eco context, it kind of expands the whole game that you play. So that's the thinking, but it comes from giving up the programming of just thinking silo and ego. And it requires a different mindset shift. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, and we have to deal with three enemies in our mind, in our I think you can call it the way we think and way we operate. Whenever we hear something, and we hear, right? We don't listen. Of course, all of us have an illusion that we listen, but we don't. And why we don't listen is because we have been programmed to listen through certain habits, and they call the habit of judgment. We are listening through what you can call as a voice of judgment. It's a voice of opinion, voice of judgment. So somebody says something, you have a judgment going on. Oh, somebody doesn't say anything, you still have a voice of judgment going on. So it's on all the time. And we cannot see new paradigms inside of this voice of judgment. We cannot go beyond the ego thinking inside of this voice of judgment. So that's something that we have to notice, how much we don't listen. And of course, some of us, or many of us, believe that we are a great listener, but sorry, human beings are not programmed to be great listeners. Being a great listener is not a characteristic that anybody has. It is a discipline that you bring forth from moment to moment. And yes, in that moment, you may be listening, but that's a conscious effort. And then next moment, you're back to what we call as downloading, which is this whole voice of judgment. Now, once you go beyond the voice of judgment, you have to deal with another enemy, which is called voice of cynicism. What is cynicism? Cynicism is the confidence that nothing great will happen. Oh, yeah, all these new things, all this, everything, anything you hear new, and then there is this cynicism called, it's not going to work. No. It's okay. Nothing great will happen. So we are all resigned and cynical about things. And we have to notice that it's all coming from the past. So once you start noticing it, you can go beyond that also. And then you deal with the big enemy. We call it the voice of fear. The voice of fear is what keeps us stuck with the past. Even though we know that the past way of working, past way of thinking, past way of behaving is not producing the result we want, but still we remain stuck with the past just because of this voice of fear. How do you deal with these enemies? We got some friends that you can develop friendship with. So the way you can go beyond this voice of judgment is to develop some curiosity. I know this person is an idiot, but maybe this time he has something to say. Let me hear. Let me be curious. Or I know things are not going to work out, and whatever they are suggesting is not going to work out, but can I hear? Can I open my mind? So bringing in curiosity. How do you know that you have opened your mind? Is when you hear something new, when you hear something contradictory, and you can process it. Mostly our mind is programmed that moment you hear something contradictory, something which doesn't fit your logic, it ignores it. It just shelves it outside. Okay, no, not valid, right? We just throw it away. The proof of an open mind is that when you can hold in your mind an idea, an information, which is contradictory to your current logic, current understanding, and you can still hold it and be with it and actually reflect on that. That's the open mind. The second friend that you can develop is compassion. We know we are not perfect. We know others are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's expected to be perfect. What is compassion? Compassion is willingness to get out of our head, get out of our uh, bubble that we are living in, and actually stepping into the shoes of other person, going there and looking at life from their eyes, seeing things from their eyes. I say that when people are saying things differently, maybe they are seeing things differently. And unless you can see what they're seeing, you can't get why they're saying what they're saying. Maybe you can try it out today in your house. If you have your children or parents or spouse or anybody, and when they're saying something differently, doesn't match what you're saying, what you're thinking, pause, check, okay, why are you saying this? What is your reference? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? That you are saying what you're saying? So it requires slowing down the conversation. If you want meaningful conversations to happen, you have to slow them down. It's not a fast food. Deep, meaningful conversations are not fast food. So the second friend is compassion, getting into the other person's world, seeing from their eyes. So first is to deal with your voice of judgment. We're talking about developing curiosity. To deal with your voice of cynicism, we are inviting you to develop compassion. And lastly, to deal with your voice of fear, we are inviting you to operate from courage. So 3 C's: curiosity, compassion, and courage. Courage to what? Courage to suspend your past programming, courage to put aside all the ways of what you know, this is the way it will happen, this is the only way it can happen, all that. You're giving up your past, suspending your past, letting go of your past, and allowing the future to emerge, allowing new possibilities to show up, new ideas, new ways of doing things, new ways of looking at things to show up. And when you start doing that, and then you can come back to everything that you're dealing with. And here in this conversation, if you open your mind and operate with curiosity and compassion and courage, then you start looking at how does this whole world of ego thinking show up in my family, in my workplace, in the society, and how do we spread awareness about it? So with that, let me show you simple what you do next, right? My suggestion on that. So I'm just going to show you a picture to capture what I mean is the next action. If my computer works at the right time, I think it should work. Okay, so here we are. And here, this is your friend. This is Tommy with his binoculars and is looking at the world outside and observing, oh, how does this whole ego thinking world work? So that's what I would invite each one of us to do. But I have a rider. Don't just look outside. Also turn the camera around and look at how others see us. How do our family members see us? How do our colleagues see us? And how do our customers and stakeholders see us? So turn the camera around and observe and inquire into this whole world of ego thinking and the impact. And the last thing before we wrap up here is I also, if you would like to know more about what we do in this area, you can write down this URL, HTTPS, and then bit.ly from ego to ego. Okay. If you have any questions, let me see if I can hear your questions. All right. If you have any questions, you can write it down. I am accessing Facebook on my computer on my mobile, so If you have any questions, you can write here. Work on the computer or my mobile. So if you have any questions, you can write here. Can't hear you. 1 second. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's not very well for me to, I'm not able to hear you. What I suggest is if you have any questions, you have to get in touch with us. You can go through this URL that I shared with you. What I suggest is if you have any questions, you have to get in touch with us. You can go through this URL that I shared with you. Okay. Okay, and you can also write down my email ID, manojonkar@gmail.com, my personal email ID. If you are not able to get in touch, you can, that's another access. And also you can connect with Caloris Group and get more information. And I think the best way is go to this bit.ly website, ego to eco. And yeah, here is my WhatsApp number. I think in case anybody is really interested to know more, you can access this WhatsApp number, write it down, 910 6456 275. 910-6456-275. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope this was useful. Thank you very much. We deeply appreciate your participation here. This is our first attempt to do a Facebook Live. Mostly we have been into Zoom video conferencing, and where we have been accustomed to interact with people face to face. Hope to get that kind of opportunity in the future. But once again, thank you very much, and see you around. Take care. Thank you.